The peaceful planet of Earth had always been unaware of the vast intergalactic conflicts raging beyond its skies, hidden in the distant reaches of the universe. Life on Earth continued in its usual rhythm, with humans focused on their daily struggles, wars between nations, but never wars between planets. But that peaceful existence was abruptly shattered on a quiet afternoon when the sky was split open by the arrival of the Zorathi, a powerful alien empire. These creatures, towering and cold, descended from their massive ships, their purpose clear: conquer Earth, enslave its people, and claim the resources of this insignificant world. With their advanced technology, unimaginable to human minds, and their seemingly invincible military might, the Zorathi believed the Earth would fall easily. They believed humanity would crumble beneath their forces, just like countless other civilizations before it. Cities fell in moments. Terrible weapons rained down from the sky, erasing entire populations. Nations scattered, their leaders imprisoned or eliminated with ruthless efficiency. Panic swept across the planet as entire cities were consumed by fire, while the Zorathi moved like a crushing tide, sweeping across the land. To the Zorathi, humanity was nothing more than a primitive species, a weak and divided people, easy to dominate. They mocked Earth's military resistance, calling it futile. But as the alien forces moved forward, one thing became unmistakably clear. They had vastly underestimated the resilience of humankind. In every corner of the Earth, from the sprawling streets of New York to the jungles of Brazil, humans fought back in ways the Zorathi hadn't imagined. It wasn't the sheer power of their weapons, but the unyielding will of the people that kept the Zorathi on edge. It was an unlikely resistance. Small bands of survivors, ordinary people with no formal training, gathering to form a makeshift rebellion. They fought with makeshift weapons, learning quickly how to use alien technology. Against its masters, a group of survivors in the wreckage of a fallen city managed to reverse-engineer part of a Zorathi weapon, turning it into a makeshift explosive powerful enough to destroy an entire battalion. In the midst of what seemed like a hopeless war, hope began to flicker. The Zorathi, overconfident in their victory, were taken aback by the human spirit that refused to break. The streets that were once silent with despair began to buzz with resistance, with people coming together from all walks of life to join the fight. The world's governments, initially fractured and chaotic, started to unite under the banner of survival. Old rivalries were forgotten and new alliances were forged. Yet, in the darkest corners of Earth, a sense of dread still lingered. Was it too late for humanity to stand a chance against these conquerors? The Zorathi were closing in, relentless in their pursuit. They were calculating, never rushing, always confident they could wipe out the resistance whenever they chose. But Earth, with its people's resourcefulness and refusal to surrender, was slowly turning the tide. The aliens, so accustomed to easy victories, had no idea what they were up against. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just its technology. It was something far deeper, an unbreakable will to survive. As the days passed, small victories began to accumulate, with humans learning from each confrontation, adapting and growing stronger. Yet every victory seemed to come with a higher cost. The Zorathi may have been ruthless, but Earth's people had something the Zorathi lacked, a fierce determination that only came from being pushed to the brink. And with every passing moment, it became clear. The invaders had made a critical mistake. They had assumed humanity would fall. But instead, it was humanity that would rise. In the wake of the Zorathi invasion, humanity stood on the edge of despair. The once proud cities now lay in ruins, the echoes of civilization barely whispering in the silent streets. The invaders, seemingly unstoppable, had taken control of the earth, but the heart of humanity was far from broken. Among the chaos, a new force was quietly forming. A ragtag group of survivors, each one from a different corner of the world, banded together under the leadership of a former soldier named Cassian Drake. Once a decorated officer in Earth's military, Cassian had become a rogue after seeing firsthand the corruption and failures of his own government. He was not a man who could simply stand by and watch as his world was crushed. He knew war, knew how to adapt to impossible odds. It was this very skill that made him the perfect leader for the resistance. Under his guidance, the survivors began to fight back in ways the Zarathi never expected. At first, it was small skirmishes, quick hit-and-run tactics that caused minimal damage but sent a loud message. Humanity was not going down without a fight. The Zarathi, so used to their overwhelming power, dismissed these early attacks as mere annoyances. But they didn't know the depths of human ingenuity. As the days went on, the resistance grew bolder, more organized. In the wreckage of a downed Zarathi transport ship, Cassian's team made a stunning discovery. With careful precision, they managed to reverse-engineer the alien technology. What had been a symbol of human powerlessness quickly became their greatest asset. The Zarathi's advanced weapons were no longer out of reach. Instead of using raw force to fight back, humans began to use their minds. The resistance developed new weapons, improvised explosives, energy shields, and even cloaking devices, all based on the Zarathi tech they had captured. The tide of war started to shift in their favor. It wasn't long before the Zarathi began to realize something they hadn't expected. Humanity was adapting at a pace they could not match. They were not dealing with a primitive species anymore. These humans, driven by desperation and resourcefulness, had begun to use the same technology that had once oppressed them to fight back in ways the aliens had never anticipated. The Zarathi were accustomed to overwhelming force. They believed that power alone could defeat any enemy. But they hadn't accounted for the unpredictable nature of human creativity. Cassian's strategies weren't built on sheer strength, but on cleverness and the relentless will to survive. Each battle, no matter how small, was a victory in the hearts of Earth's people. As the resistance began to strike with more precision and force, the Zarathi were forced to reassess their position. What had begun as minor attacks against supply lines soon escalated into full-scale raids on alien facilities. The humans were not merely resisting, they were striking at the very foundation of the Zarathi occupation. The once fearsome invaders began to panic, unsure of how to respond to these unpredictable humans. They had thought themselves the masters of war, but now they found themselves outmatched in ways they couldn't comprehend. A growing number of Zarathi commanders reported that their forces were being caught off guard, that the humans were becoming more daring and more skilled with each passing day. Meanwhile, Cassian and his team continued to push forward, their victories creating a ripple effect across Earth. More and more people, once scared and disorganized, were joining the fight. They weren't just soldiers. They were ordinary people, with a fierce determination to reclaim their world. The resistance wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As the Zarathi watched this transformation unfold, they began to feel something they had never considered: doubt. Perhaps this war was not as simple as they had first thought. Perhaps they had underestimated the humans not just in strength, but in something far more dangerous: their unyielding will to overcome any obstacle. And as each day passed, that doubt grew. The spark of rebellion that had once seemed like a flicker in the dark was now becoming a blazing fire. Humanity had found its strength, not in sheer force, but in its ability to adapt, to fight back with everything it had. The Zarathi had set out to conquer a weak, divided species, but in doing so, they had awakened a force greater than they could ever imagine. Humanity's first major victory came when the resistance managed to pull off a daring and almost impossible operation. They hijacked a key Zarathi command station deep in the heart of the enemy's occupation zone. The Zarathi had assumed that their command centers, guarded by their most advanced forces, were impregnable. They were wrong. Cassian Drake, with his sharp mind and strategic brilliance, led a team of fearless fighters on a night assault against the heavily fortified facility. They used the knowledge they had gained from years of studying Zorathi technology and tactics, combined with their own ingenuity, to create a plan that caught the invaders completely off guard. The assault was fast, calculated, and precise. It wasn't about overwhelming firepower. It was about knowing exactly where and when to strike. The resistance breached the command station's defenses, infiltrating the heart of the Zorathi's operations. In a move that shocked the invaders, Cassian's team captured crucial data and sabotaged the command center's communication systems, leaving the Zorathi leadership in disarray. News of the attack spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the Zorathi ranks and across the galaxy. The resistance had just made a statement. Humanity was no longer weak and helpless. The Zorathi, who had once thought of humans as little more than pests, began to see them in a new light. The victory was symbolic, but it was far more than that. It was proof that the tide was turning. Word of the Resistance's success ignited something in Earth's people, a spark of hope that had been extinguished for too long. With each passing day, more and more humans joined the fight, seeing the rebellion not as a distant cause, but as a reality they could fight for. The world that had once been divided and fractured began to unite. Governments, once scattered and desperate, found common ground in the face of their shared enemy. Humanity's strength grew with every new ally, every new fighter, and every new victory. But the Zorathi leadership, despite the setback, remained confident in their superiority. They continued to dismiss the humans as nothing more than a nuisance. The invaders were not yet ready to accept that the very species they had thought so easy to conquer had developed into a force capable of challenging their empire. But the victory at the Zorathi command station was just the beginning. Cassian and his team began to develop a far more daring strategy, one that would strike directly at the heart of the Zorathi Empire. The resistance had tasted victory, and they were hungry for more. What they didn't anticipate, however, was the emergence of an unexpected ally. From the distant reaches of space, another alien race, the Horiths, who had long suffered under the Zorathi's oppressive rule, reached out to humanity. The Horiths, though not a warlike species, had been enslaved and exploited by the Zorathi for centuries. With their knowledge of the Zorathi's inner workings and their vast networks across the galaxy, the Horiths brought invaluable intelligence and resources to the table. The alliance between the Resistance and the Horiths was a game-changer. The two species, united by a common cause, began to pool their strengths. The Horiths provided Earth's fighters with advanced technological support, while Cassian and his team taught them the art of unconventional warfare. The combined forces grew stronger by the day, and with each new victory, the once invincible Zorathi Empire began to show cracks. The Zorathi had made a fatal mistake by underestimating humanity, and now, with the Horiths' help, humanity's rebellion was gaining unstoppable momentum. The Zorathi, for the first time since their invasion, felt true fear. They were no longer facing a fragmented, weak species. They were facing a united and determined force, one that was slowly but surely dismantling their empire from the inside out. The once unthinkable idea of human domination was no longer a fantasy. It was becoming a reality, and the Zorathi had no idea how to stop it. As the war raged on, the Zorathi, confident in their technological superiority, focused relentlessly on overwhelming humanity with sheer military might. They believed that their advanced weapons, formidable fleets, and brutal tactics would crush the growing resistance. Yet the Zorathi had failed to account for one crucial thing: the incredible adaptability of the human spirit. While the invaders were consumed with tactics of destruction, humanity was quietly evolving, learning and discovering new ways to fight back. The Zorathi had underestimated humanity's resilience, and soon, the humans would show them just how dangerous that mistake could be. The turning point came during a daring raid on a Zorathi flagship, an operation that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. Cassian Drake and his team had spent weeks planning the attack, relying on every scrap of alien technology and intelligence they had gathered over the years. As they infiltrated the flagship, the humans did something no one thought possible. They manipulated the alien technology with ease. Using stolen Zorathi devices, they hacked into the flagship's main systems, seizing control of its weapons and defenses. In a stunning twist, the humans turned the Zorathi's own power against them, launching a surprise assault that left the once imposing flagship crippled and vulnerable. It wasn't just a victory. It was a message. Humanity had shown that, despite being vastly outmatched in technology, they could outsmart their invaders and turn the tide of the war. But this success was more than just a tactical victory. As humans interacted with the Zorathi technology, something far more profound began to occur. Close exposure to the alien devices unlocked latent potential within certain individuals. Humans who had come into direct contact with the advanced tech began to develop strange abilities. It started with small, seemingly unnoticeable changes: enhanced reflexes, heightened senses, and an almost supernatural ability to read and adapt to alien machinery. But soon, the abilities grew stronger and more varied. Some humans could interface directly with Zorathi technology, manipulating it, with nothing more than their minds. Others exhibited extraordinary physical prowess, far beyond what any human was capable of. This transformation, though subtle at first, soon became impossible to ignore. The once limited human resistance was now faced with an entirely new force: warriors, enhanced by the very technology that the Zorathi had used to enslave them. The Zorathi, still focused on traditional military power, were blind to the true potential of the humans. What they had seen as weakness was actually the foundation for humanity's greatest strength: an unyielding will to survive, to adapt, and to evolve. With each passing day, the humans' new abilities grew more powerful, more refined. A new generation of human warriors was emerging, one that was more than just a match for the Zorathi. It was becoming something far more dangerous. The Zorathi, despite their vast superiority in numbers and firepower, were facing an enemy they could not predict or control. Humans, who had once been the weak, enslaved species, were now on the brink of becoming something more, something entirely new. This shift in the balance of power was not just a physical transformation. It was a change in the very nature of humanity. With their enhanced abilities, humans began to unlock their deepest instincts: the drive to thrive, to push beyond their limits, and to overcome impossible odds. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something greater, something that had been buried deep within them all along. The war had changed, and humanity was now leading the charge. As the Zorathi continued to rely on their traditional tactics of domination and brute force, they were blindsided by the new human warriors, who struck with speed, precision, and an unrelenting drive. Each victory not only weakened the Zorathi forces, but it also amplified humanity's newfound power. The once feared invaders, who had thought they could crush Earth's resistance with ease, were now caught in a deadly game they didn't understand. The humans were no longer just trying to survive. They were becoming the unstoppable force they had always been destined to be. With each battle, the Zorathi's confidence eroded, replaced by growing fear and confusion. The war was no longer just a struggle for freedom. It had become a fight for the very future of the galaxy. Humanity had found its true power, and it was only a matter of time before they used it to reshape the stars themselves. As the war raged on, the Zorathi began to feel the weight of their grave mistake in underestimating humanity. They had come to Earth believing it would be an easy conquest, an insignificant world to plunder. But now, their strongholds were falling one by one. The humans, fueled by their newfound abilities and unbreakable will, were dismantling the Zorathi Empire piece by piece. Each victory, no matter how small, weakened the once mighty alien forces and sent a ripple of fear through their ranks. The Zorathi, who had never faced a foe like this, were now struggling to maintain control, and their commanders grew more desperate with each passing day. They had underestimated the humans' resourcefulness and relentless drive, and it was a mistake they were beginning to regret deeply. In the midst of this growing momentum, Cassian Drake and his team planned a bold and dangerous strike, an assault, on the Zorathi capital itself, the very heart of the enemy's empire. The mission was risky, even by their standards, but the stakes were higher than ever before. If humanity was to win this war, they needed to uncover the truth behind the Zorathi's invasion. What they found, hidden deep within the capital's heavily guarded archives, was a revelation that would change everything. The Zorathi's plans were far darker than anyone had imagined. The aliens were not just after Earth's resources, they intended to wipe out all of humanity. The more they learned about the Zorathi, the more chilling the discovery became. The Kur, alien race, in their cold, calculating way, saw humanity as a threat far greater than any other species they had conquered. They feared the potential of the human spirit, its adaptability, creativity, and relentless pursuit of survival. To the Zorathi, humanity wasn't just another species to enslave. It was a race that could one day rise up and challenge their very existence. And so, their invasion wasn't simply an effort to control Earth. It was a plan to exterminate humanity before it could ever become strong enough to stand against them. This revelation, once uncovered, sent shockwaves through the resistance. What had once been a fight for survival was now something much larger. It wasn't just about reclaiming Earth. It was about the very future of the galaxy. The Zorathi's true intentions had been exposed, and humanity's mission was no longer just about pushing back invaders. It was about securing a future free from the shadow of the Zorathi threat. Cassian, ever the strategist, knew that this discovery had to change their approach. No longer could they afford to fight in small skirmishes and guerrilla tactics. This was now an all-out war for freedom, not just on Earth, but across the stars. If the Zorathi were allowed to continue, humanity's existence would always be under threat. But if the humans could defeat them, they could finally ensure that no race would ever again see them as weak or expendable. With this new understanding, the resistance, now united and more powerful than ever, began to take the fight to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. No longer were they just fighting for their world. They were leading a rebellion that would inspire countless others. The war against the Zorathi had become a symbol of freedom, a rallying cry for every oppressed species in the universe. The humans, once the enslaved, were now the liberators. The Zorathi, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the defensive, struggling to hold their empire together. They had underestimated humanity, and now the price of that error was becoming clear. The war was far from over, but humanity had already changed the course of history. They had discovered the power of unity, resilience, and innovation, and that power would carry them forward, no matter the odds. The final stage of humanity's struggle had arrived. The Zorathi Empire, once a powerful and invincible force, was now on the brink of collapse. The resistance, a unified and unstoppable force, had pushed through countless battles, overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. They had fought with every resource at their disposal, using the advanced alien technology they had scavenged and harnessing the unique abilities that had emerged within them. Humanity's will to survive, coupled with their newfound power, had made them a force that the Zorathi could no longer ignore. As they marched toward the heart of the Zorathi stronghold, the tension in the air was thick, but there was no turning back. Cassian Drake, once a rogue soldier, was now a symbol of humanity's defiance. His leadership, brilliant strategies, and unwavering belief in the power of human ingenuity had brought them this far. The resistance had become more than just a group of fighters. They were a revolution. The Zarathi, confident in their power and advanced technology, never believed humanity could reach this point. They thought they could crush the rebellion at any time, but now they were cornered. The humans were at their doorstep, and the last Zarathi stronghold was the only thing standing between them and complete victory. The final battle was nothing short of epic. Cassian and his forces stormed the Zarathi capital, fighting through fierce defenses and seemingly endless waves of alien soldiers. The air was filled with the hum of alien energy weapons and the sound of desperate gunfire. But the humans pressed on, fueled by an unshakable determination. Every inch of ground they gained was a testament to how far they had come. The Zarathi fleet, once a symbol of unmatched power, was now being systematically dismantled by the humans' clever tactics. The resistance had learned to use the very alien technology that had once threatened them to turn the tide in their favor. The battles were brutal, the casualties high, but humanity fought with a resolve that the Zarathi had never encountered before. As the battle reached its peak, Cassian found himself face to face with the Zarathi Supreme Commander. This was the moment. The alien leader, towering and imposing, sneered at the human resistance, underestimating them to the very end. The two faced off in a final showdown, the weight of the war resting on their shoulders. It was a battle of wills, a clash of two species, each fighting for their survival. The Zarathi Supreme Commander fought with all the might of his people, but Cassian, empowered by his experiences, his team, and the strength of a united humanity, was no longer the same man who had first picked up a weapon. He was a symbol of what humanity had become, a force of nature that refused to be defeated. The fight was fierce, but in the end, Cassian emerged victorious. With the Supreme Commander's defeat, the Zarathi's last hope crumbled. The alien empire, once proud and unyielding, began to fall apart. Their vast fleets shattered, their armies scattered, and their leadership was broken. The once feared empire was reduced to nothing more than a shadow of its former self, its power lost to a people it had underestimated. However, the victory came at a cost. Earth, forever scarred by the conflict, would never be the same. The land was damaged, the cities that remained were mere echoes of their former glory, and countless lives had been lost. But in the ashes of this destruction, humanity had been transformed. They were no longer a vulnerable species under the thumb of oppressors. They were now a powerful force with the potential to shape the future of the galaxy. The war had changed them, unlocked something deeper within their DNA, and gave birth to a new generation of warriors who carried the weight of this victory. Humanity had gone from the brink of extinction to becoming the dominant force in the universe. With the Zarathi Empire broken, Earth stood at the crossroads of a new era. But the victory was not just about survival, it was about control. With their newfound power and influence, humanity now held the fate of the galaxy in its hands. It was a heavy responsibility, but one that Earth's people were ready to bear. The Zarathi's fall marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The galaxy would never be the same, and the story of humanity's rise would be told for generations to come. With the Zarathi defeated and their empire reduced to ruins, the galaxy found itself in a state of uncertainty. The once feared alien overlords were no more, and Earth, the very planet they had sought to subjugate, had become the new seat of power in the universe. The humans, who had been enslaved, oppressed, and underestimated for so long, now stood as the new rulers of the stars. The shift in power was not just a political one, it was a revolution in every sense of the word. The galaxy watched in awe as humanity, led by heroes like Cassian Drake, began to reshape the cosmos. The war had not only transformed Earth's people physically, through the newfound abilities and strength they had gained, but it had also sparked a transformation in their mindset. No longer did they see themselves as victims or conquerable. They had emerged as a force to be reckoned with, one capable of achieving greatness and forging their own destiny. Cassian and his team, once outcasts and renegades, were now celebrated as the faces of humanity's rise. They were not just heroes. They were symbols of hope for every species that had ever been oppressed or underestimated. Their victory over the Zorathi had proven that even the most crushed and broken species could rise to greatness, that the will to survive could spark an unstoppable wave of change. As Earth extended its influence throughout the galaxy, its people found themselves at the helm of a new era. The Zorathi's former allies, the alien races that had once sided with them, now watched from the sidelines, unsure of what to expect next. Some feared humanity's newfound power, others admired it, and some simply marveled at the speed with which Earth had risen to dominance. The galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity's place in it was no longer that of the enslaved. The universe was now open to the possibility of a new order, one where Earth and its people could decide the future, not as a subjugated world, but as the most powerful force among the stars. Despite their rapid ascension, humanity knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges. The galaxy was vast, with countless civilizations, some of which may not welcome the rise of Earth's influence. But the humans were not the same as they had been before the invasion. They had learned the hard way that survival often came at a great cost, and they had the strength and wisdom to build a future beyond the mistakes of the past. Cassian stood at the forefront of this new age, not as a conqueror, but as a leader, committed to guiding humanity's growth. The war had been brutal, the losses immense, but through it all, the humans had become more than what they were. They had become a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and, above all, the unyielding will to thrive. The final lines of their story echoed through the cosmos, reaching the farthest corners of the galaxy. Humanity had been enslaved, humiliated, and broken. But from the ashes of their suffering, they had emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. The galaxy would never forget the day when the enslaved became the Overlords, and the echoes of that transformation would resonate for millennia to come. The rise of humanity was not just a victory. It was a revolution that would shape the future of all life in the galaxy. And as the stars watched in silence, they all knew one thing for certain. Humanity's story had only just begun.